Hi, good evening. This is the advisory board, and it is August 20th, 19. We're having a little bit of a slightly off-cycle meeting tonight to discuss some information relative to a big server crash that we had. What was that, in July? And how we're going to fund paying for some new stuff. And would you like to sort of give an overview to start off of that?
Yes, so we have a request for a total of $15,431.49 tonight for two reasons. The first is to purchase a high-capacity PC to house email. We're working with Gmail right now, but back in the day, before we switched to that, we used something called First Class, and the company that was hosting all that gave us a call in late June and said, "Hi, we're going out of business. Do you still want your email? You have until the end of July to make arrangements to get it." We've gotten it, but we need to put it somewhere. You know, it's got to be housed somewhere, and there's a lot of it. So that's the $2,500 expense. There are other expenses related to that, but we're handling it within the operating budget. The second is we did have a server rollover and die. Is that how we refer to it?
That's what I call it.
Yeah, on July 9th, I believe, that housed several of our applications, and we had to spend the monies that you see listed here that add up to $12,931.49 to buy some equipment, but most importantly, pay a data recovery service to go through all of the drives and extract all the data. And since it was mission critical to our tax collection services, that tax bills, as you probably all know, are due by August 1st, not being able to process payments of any kind, not being able to issue municipal lien certificates for people buying and selling, things like that, it did not give us the luxury of waiting weeks to get it. We are working off of a temporary server. We will need to purchase something to replace that, but this is just the work to get back what we didn't have. You can see at the bottom the hours that Ton spent on the project. So we are back up and running. That's a good thing. We learned a lot, unfortunately. And Ton is here to give you all the details that I'm sure I've glossed over, any questions that you have. And also, we are working together on a long-term plan because I think one of the biggest issues is both the backup and the main data drive for our financial system, our billing system, was on that server. Not good. It was done that way before Ton arrived. Can't explain it. Wasn't ideal. But we need to put a much more robust plan in place that will take care of our equipment, make sure we're operational when we need to be, and we're working on that right now. So that's a quick overview.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the data wasn't backed up?
I'm going to turn it over to Ton.
Actually,
You need a
CDS,
microphone, Ton.
For TV, not for us.
We can hear you.
actually, there's a program called CDS. It resides at two places, one over DPW server, over DPW site, and one reside over here at the town hall. And the two also, it's the same program, but it's different data sets. That's something that I misunderstood at the beginning because it has always been configured DPW program got backed up to our storage at town hall for offsite backup. And then the town hall CDS program is back up to the available space on the Hyper-V server. So kind of let's take a step back for a second. There's a physical machine that we use called Hyper-V. It houses 4 different virtual machines in there. And when the hard drive crashed and stopped working, all went down with it. And it wasn't on the 9th, it was on the 12th, because I did a Windows servers update. And routinely, after the server update, you just reboot them. So when I reboot it, it come back and it's missing the drive, missing the booting disk. So after troubleshooting with that, I said, okay, I can't revive it. And I choose to do it 4 o'clock on this Friday afternoon because DPW left at 3:30. Nobody's around here, so it's a good time to do server updates, that kind of work when nobody's around. So that's why I choose that time to do that. That's the second week of a regular Tuesday Microsoft update. So I choose Friday to do that. Give it a couple, 4 or 5 days away from Tuesday, make sure everything works before you jump on board. So that is how the whole thing started. So once I figured that there's a hardware problem here, there's no longer, it's just a question, can revive it. I kind of let Blythe know, say, okay, the hardware died.
I think the specific question was it backed up?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just leading to that too. So the backup, because the program of the town hall was backed up onto the Hyper-V server at the same locations. And I've been looking at that, and also I misunderstood when I see the two programs interact with each other. I thought it was a redundancy because one over DPW, one over here, and they work with them. So they are not, I thought that they're not different data set, but they use it for redundancy and performance because different locations. People over DPW can use it. It's faster to be local. And that's why I thought, okay, there's no need to do backup of both of them. We have a backup DPW. We got it. We got a backup of this town hall to a different location. So when something happened to the virtual machines, I can recover from that. So we have two different places of that's a backup. But that's wrong. That was misunderstood on my part. That's wrong. That errors on my part for not understanding it completely. So when the server not coming back up, and we figured out that was something to do with the hard drive. Wasn't quite sure what the RAID controller, which is the one that controls the disk, or the disk itself, or the server. It wasn't anything wrong with the server. It's something to do with the disk.
Okay, so the
System.
problem, I probably don't need to know all the details of the problem, but with this new money, will we be backing up like doing some kind of web backup so that, like, if we have a tornado in Norfolk, the data's in Kansas or that kind of thing?
We haven't gone,
Shut up, Kansas, I know, right?
we're not cloud-based at all. We never have been. One of the things that Ton is starting to look at is whether that makes sense from various perspectives, from financially, is it more expensive or less? You know, if it's somewhere else, that may be great if you have a tornado here, but what's it mean if, you know, the tornado takes you out here? Like, we have no emergency generator here. We have no power if the power goes out. So it's great if it's in Kansas, but if we can't link to it, it's no good to us there. And so we're thinking about all those things. I think the short answer is we have recovered from what happened, and Ton can hopefully give you a simpler explanation of what that means. But I think for the long term, we do have to think about which way do we go, or do we do a hybrid of two different options depending on what it is we're talking about.
I have some experience having run a company that managed these kinds of things, and what I think, so I'm very concerned about these, you know, the machines fall apart, the power goes down, you have these problems, and sending them to the cloud not only solves that issue, but also solves security. I don't know if you're aware that there's, I guess, Texas, there are a bunch of municipalities in Texas that were attacked yesterday or something.
Yeah.
It's been happening all over.
We
the
have
country.
cybersecurity coverage now for
Okay.
these sorts of things, yes.
Uh,
When we're attacked, if there's a ransomware request or we've been locked out,
Just thinking about, you know, the town of Norfolk is smaller than my organization was, but like having outsourcing those kinds of things, it was such a no-brainer for us that, you know, I'd encourage us to think about that for the future.
we're definitely thinking about it. I think one of our concerns is it might be more expensive than the purchase of a machine.
Well, so not an expert, but so aren't there, so looking forward,
Yep.
right? Besides, obviously, my opinion is we gotta pay these bills, obviously, but going forward, I think is what probably we're all more concerned about, so.
Yes.
So there's the backup, which, right, so you could have a server, but then that could be backed up in the cloud, right? Or everything could go to the cloud, right? Those are two separate approaches.
Yes, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand what your question is. So you talk about the backup here and go to the cloud?
Right, so isn't one option would be if we still wanted to maintain a server, right? That should be backed up some other place, maybe, like in the cloud, right? But then other municipalities, just like other companies, sometimes people are moving everything to the cloud.
Correct.
And that's what we're starting to look at.
Okay. And is it true that, I always thought that a RAID array was supposed to work, so if there was like a big equipment failure, that data supposed to go to one of the other disks, one of the other arrays, right? So that,
That is correct. Yes, yeah, you're
was that,
correct.
but because of the controller was what croaked out, that's what
No, I
inhibited
thought-
that from happening? Just
No,
out of curiosity?
It wasn't even the controller,
okay.
because I thought that was a controller. We don't have any of the same alike hardware for me even to just take things out, to swap in and out to try it. So I overnight the controller, because that's the first thing I go after, which is it can be a community controller, because if the controller doesn't work, it won't see the hard drives. So I got back in, it's still not working. And the other piece to it, there's another piece that connected to the controller card, is a riser card that connects to the motherboard. And that didn't work either. So the only thing that's left is the hard drive themselves. And you are right, under the RAID, if one drive doesn't work, like one drive or two drive can fail before the whole thing break down. But go through the data recovery process is, like Todd says, almost an anomaly. All 6 drives had crashed. It basically just stuck on the planet itself. It doesn't move. So it's really rare to see that happening. In my career, I've never seen an R6 drive did behave the same way. So the problem was the drive crashed, so the head stuck on the platter, and it doesn't move. And that's where the problem lies. So the whole once more than 2 drives don't work. The whole RAID array is gone.
I have a question.
Arthur, sure.
So, I know we're talking about going forward, backing up to just the vast majority of these dollars are all just services.
Yes.
So, do we need a motion to then offer to pay the services? I mean, we can have a discussion about, Amazon Web Services, virtual servers, backup, but I'm just saying, we're here tonight to then pay the $13,000 bill. I didn't have any, I appreciate the explanation. Yeah, to me, it sounds insane that all 6 drives crashed at the same time, but, okay, so are we looking for a motion, or do people have any
That and the
questions?
2,500 above for the.
Right.
The PC
Oh, on top, I see,
to
yes.
put,
Got it.
15,431.
If I can, so before we move to motion, I
Sure.
have all kinds of questions on this $2,500 purchase, so maybe let me redirect there if I can. So, your First Class was the company, correct? And they went out of business?
No, actually, First Class is a
That-
type of email system.
Okay.
And-
So the company went out of business, and they said, here's your data, and it's in this First Class format, or did they extract it to some other more standard format?
Actually, it's a little more convoluted than that. The company that we have service with, called Civic Plus, and they do first-class email for a lot of municipality,
Yeah.
and a lot of municipality have moved on. The reason we couldn't and we didn't move on, we used the first-class email as a backup because of the public record request. It was cheaper to leave it there than to convert them into Gmail. So we left it there. And what happened is that Civic Plus has a contract with another service provider that house the email systems. And we are on a multi-tenant server. So on that machine, we are not the only client. So when that vendor, Canon, went out of business, went bankrupt, Civics Plus contacted us in late June, saying, the company gonna go away and the data is gonna be, they're gonna shut the machine down at the end of July. Do you want your data, you wanna do something about it? So that is when I contact the actual company that has the data center that house the physical data. I work with them to extract out the data just for the Norfolk.
Right, so what format is that currently in?
It's in first class, and we use that locally here in order for record request.
So the first-class data structures, are you able to query it or to search it for records?
Yes.
So
Yes.
is there server software involved as well? Is this more than just data retention, but there needs to be some server type of functionality in order to, like, how are you querying into the first-class data?
The company that provide me the data also provide me the first class software
Right,
to.
and is there a support contract on that? Like, or is this just,
This is just one-time service, and they give me he give me his name, his company, if we need any assistance. That is the one that we go that we can call him for support.
well, we don't have a support contract in
We don't.
place?
No, we
So
don't.
if there is a records request for something that lives in that, how much data from a terabyte perspective?
It's about 1.4 gig.
1.4?
No, 1.4 terabyte.
Okay, 1.5 terabytes of data. And there needs to be some first-class software in order to make it usable. It's not searchable through anywhere else. So if we had a records request and then there was something wrong with the first-class software aspect of it, like, what do we do at that point?
He give me, because of the data, we have 2 copies of it, and also the data and the program itself.
Yep.
We have 2 copies of that on 2 different external drive. I can copy to one of them into the machine that we're going to purchase.
Yep.
Just enough space and just to run around the clock, and with the Windows operating system server.
So I'm saying, I'm not talking from a data perspective or a one perspective as much as if there's a problem with the software itself. There's a defect in first class, we aren't using it properly, we're not getting the results that we expect. What's the remedy or the recourse from running first class? Like, how do we get support on that?
The
We
only
have to
support we
fulfill-
got is with this vendor.
So, but we don't have a contract, so it would take additional money, services?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Or, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I think your question, I can answer your question of that.
yeah,
There is a solution to that. There is another vendor that has been there's another vendor working in this whole situations too, because we are not the only client to Civic Plus. So what they have, there's another vendor that can take first class, take their data and bring it into Gmail services for us. They will charge $5,900 to do that job.
a one-time charge.
A
to
one-time
convert that.
charge.
So, where I'm going with this is I think it is asking for all kinds of trouble. This request is asking for all kinds of future trouble on many levels, right? First is, if this is we've just experienced everything that can go wrong hosting hardware and data here with this other server example. So, if we're gonna choose to host the hardware and the data for our email retention to serve public records request, we ought to look right on this piece of paper of what could possibly go wrong, right? So what's not here listed is redundancy and UPS power supplies to prevent the drives platters from crashing, all those kinds of things. I think the true cost of doing this the right way is certainly more than $2,500. The second problem is this is in some proprietary format, which now I think, from what I've heard, is questionable whether there's going to be support, and if so, at what cost to be able to run and operate this. The fact that it's in some proprietary format is dubious, right? I would say that it's probably worth more money, to be honest with you, to spend to get this converted into more of an open standards. And maybe this is the opportunity we can use to find some cloud solution for this now, right, rather than pushing that off to a future thing, because I think this is just gonna throw good money after bad. We're gonna set up something that's gonna fail in the future with this. I think this $2,500 to host the emails for record retention is asking for trouble, especially given what we're dealing with this other scenario.
I very much appreciate your point on all this, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that I've only been here a few months, but my impression is that we've run IT on a shoestring over the years, only buying barely what we need, not replacing things quickly, not even, maybe looked at the cloud, I don't know, maybe Todd has an answer to that, since you've been here a little, longer than I have. There are probably better ways to do that. We haven't, it seems like we've taken the approach of what do we need to basically get by? And that may be what this is just we need a place to put all of this till we can figure out what to do better with it.
I appreciate that answer, but my response to that is that seems like it's not very fiscally conservative.
I'm not disagreeing
right?
with
That's
you, I'm
like
just saying,
throwing
please
money at it.
understand where we've come from.
I got it. I'm just saying that, to me, this sounds like it's throwing money at a problem to solve it for tomorrow without necessarily taking a time out to think through what is the most cost-effective and long-term way to, and fiscally responsible way to solve it.
Right,
Because
this is a
I
That's great.
opportunity.
I don't think.
Yeah,
that
no,
this is-
I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
It's just that's gonna take some support with other boards to, other groups to be willing to spend the money to do it, the right way, whatever that is.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that point, because what I heard was for $5,900 or one tech refresh cycle on a $2,500 bill, we can convert it to Gmail, which is the system we're using right now. So we can convert for perpetuity this system for $2,900 more than we'd be spending here to just have a piece of equipment that will need to be replaced in 3 years anyway.
That's, and I'm aware that was an option, but what we brought you was the
Yeah.
lowest cost option, maybe not the best option
Right.
altogether.
Right.
Right, but we want to look ahead.
And that's great. Like I said,
Transformative leadership.
I'm very excited to hear that. I'm just, want to be cautious that if we come, Tom and I have talked about a path forward in a much better arrangement of redundancy and backup and storage and all, and looking at a new server in a year with backup that could cost, with a 5-year warranty, maybe $40,000. Is that going to be a smart move versus something else? We want to start looking at all those things and figure out.
Well, let me delve into this a little bit more. So what is a large capacity PC mean? Like, what is the specs on that? That doesn't actually mean much. Like 1.5 terabytes of data is
It's
not all
unfortunately,
that scary.
it's 1.5 terabytes.
Yeah.
With the, I have to run a RAID 1
Yeah.
for redundancy. And also costs about another $800 for the server operating system on that same PC. And the PC, when you add them all up, all the pieces together, that is how much it come to.
So, I mean, what is this? Is just like
It's
a
a-
business class?
It's a
desktop?
precision, it's a Dell Precision class machines.
And then that data would be on that particular machine, but then that machine's not backed up anyplace.
Because this is basically static data only.
Right.
I still have the 2 hard drive that I'm currently holding the data that I just basically store away, and this server would just use for public record request.
I
That is
understand, but we've just proven that running RAID locally on a single server is not the redundancy that we would have expected either. So I'm not sure that this is a smart solution of just planning to have the only copy of this data that we're gonna have that we legally need to have available is just gonna be sitting on this one server in the basement here somewhere. Again, it doesn't seem like it's a great solution.
What's the length of the retention requirement?
Unfortunately, when I have been explored that with the clerk office quite a bit, forever. And actually, it depends on the content.
Yes, depending on the content, it could
Subject to
be.
the content, and there's no way of searching everybody's email for the content, what do we keep and what not to be keep.
Some of it's forever,
And
Okay, so I mean, to me, just, sharing, I think that if it is in perpetuity, to me, the Gmail conversion makes a lot more sense. But, I also want to tread carefully. I mean, I know, like, for example, we could say convert it to Gmail. If the retention schedule was less, you could make an argument, well, let's just spool up an Amazon web server. That would cost pennies compared to all of this, because usually they only charge you if you're going to use it substantially. So we're just going to spool something up, put it in the cloud, it's all going to get backed up, it'll barely get used, only when somebody does a retention request. So, I mean, there's lots of ways to sort of approach this, and, I want to provide oversight, I also don't want to second guess. But again, because this has to be kept in perpetuity, I mean, to me, the Gmail conversion seems to make a lot of sense, just keep all the emails together. So yeah, I mean, I would be in favor of spending more, but then it also gets to the case of, okay, so we're spending email conversion dollars. Well, I guess this is an emergency because of the outage, so, okay. Yeah.
Unexpected, unforeseen.
Right.
The other question I have on as opposed to the retention, is what's the frequency of records requests? So are we standing up one server for how many records requests a year?
That is a really hard thing to gauge. We've got some super users who will request things on a weekly basis, and you get some very, once in a great moon, you could have a request on something else. It's really hard to say what people will ask for.
Right, but we have some data historically. Like, I don't understand if it's 100 a year or if it's thousands a year. Like, what order of magnitude? are
I'd
we
have to
talking?
ask Carol Green.
Okay.
Carol.
I mean, her office handles those, I don't know. We probably have one or two people that have hundreds on their own, and then we have some that might be one here and one there.
Okay.
We can try and get you some data on that.
Do you feel comfortable with the Google conversion option?
There's some gotcha in there that I haven't mentioned yet, because even with the Google conversion, this is the firm that have been doing that, and I don't know anybody else doing it. There's a limit to the set by Google, which is if it's 25 meg, they're going to stop. They have to start divide up. So if you have somebody, example like Bob Bullock, which is building directors, he has a lot of attachment, and when the attachments surpass that, and they're going to have to split all of this into smaller chunk to accommodate the limitations, and that was can be dicey, because now it's not breaking into 2 or 3 pieces. So when you query against something like that, you have to be aware of what it is. So I don't know how's that going to have.
Do you know what kind of licensing that we have with Google? I know, for example, I work for a nonprofit. I work in the IT department. We have a restricted Google license where we do all of our email and calendar through. It has certain limitations. Is it free? Do we pay license fees for Google? Like,
Oh,
what
no,
level do we have?
We pay for them, but the conversion limit, cap limit set by Google, it's set up like 25 meg and nothing more than that.
Because they'll charge us for space above and beyond a certain,
It's not the space, it's the cap of conversion per email
I see.
and attachment with it, like per item.
But we don't have a requirement I mean, so if somebody makes a request, they get 3 versions of one email, that still solves you fulfilled the request, it doesn't have to be pretty.
I think what he's saying is someone asked for an email from a project proponent.
Yeah.
And project proponent submits a massive document.
Right.
It's
Huge.
split. It's gonna be hard, it's gonna have to be named properly when it's split. And I'm not it's gonna have to be named so it ends up in the same pile. So when they make a request, they don't just get a portion of what was submitted, they get the whole thing, because they're gonna end up splitting the documents.
But from a legal requirement, if this is something that we're just worried about for just sort of
Technical, I think what he's saying.
the technical issue, but if you get 3 emails, if we have to, so all we're saying is that so in order to do this, they're gonna split up the emails, okay? The attachments. But for us to fulfill our legal obligations to return the information, it doesn't have to be in the same
I agree
form,
with you.
right? So this isn't, so even if, I'm just saying, like, if you're, things that you're transacting every day, you really want it to be nice and clean. Your daily emails, you want to be nice and clean. For the historical stuff, like, that's probably a problem that I mean, just from what it sounds like, it's a problem that we could live with.
If we feel comfortable that the legal requirements would be satisfied with that, I know sometimes people can be really particular. We had a case of a legal hold that was placed, and I wanted to make a backup copy of all of our files on basically shared drives for that purpose, and no, I couldn't do that. You know, sometimes it has to be the original. I mean, I can't imagine that's practical. You know, I wonder what other, you know, local governments are doing to maintain all this email. I mean, surely people aren't keeping, you know, ancient Outlook servers around, but to me, if we feel like that converting to Google would, you know,
I think it
reasonably
would.
satisfy.
I think we could still produce it. You say it wouldn't be as pretty as it was going in, coming out, but I don't think that that's our issue. And I think the older it gets, the less likely it is to be searched anyway. So,
I'd support something which is longer term like that.
yeah, no, I get
I
that.
mean, and if you guys need to go back and think about it some more, that's totally fine.
Not to get too crazy, but the chain of custody of this data has already been broken 6 ways to Sunday in terms of the original vendor to the other vendor to this first-class data to a PC in the basement. There's no write blocker on any of these drives in all these passes around. It's not gonna stand up in federal court, no matter what happens. So I wouldn't worry about that level of technicality if we're able to at least produce the email. That's gonna be what we're gonna be able to do, right? The data, what's it called, the exfoliation or whatever it is long gone. So I don't think we need to worry about the inner workings of legal proceedings on this stuff as much as we just need to be able to produce it in whatever form we can at this point. And that's the extent and the limit of what we're able to provide.
Again, if we're comfortable. And so again, I think we're saying, or at least what I'm trying to say is, can you go back, can you flesh out and get comfortable with what type of export or upload to Google option would actually be?
Yes, I can. But I do agree with you, because that would be a best solution for us, because first-class search is not an easy task to do. So if we can convert that to Google or on sample location, it would be ideal. But we were trying to contain the cost. That is the best solutions, because we have 3 different sources. 2 external drives that sit on the shelf, just from doing, basically just static data that's holding it. And the server would just basically, the copy of that to service primarily for myself, my associate, and Carol, in case they want to do historical public record requests. So static data, although nothing more than that.
Does anyone know what are the ramifications or the fines if we're unable to produce data through a public records request? Is there a fiscal penalty? Like what happens when someone comes looking for an email and we can't produce it?
Stoning.
Federally,
They'll
FOIA
report us.
requests there's a penalty per day you're late past the window you have to produce the records.
Right, does that apply for
Public is a state.
municipalities?
Public records request.
Yeah, there's a whole state law. Within
I mean, the reason I'm asking is, this sounds like small, I mean, if we're concerned about the ability to produce stuff out of first class, you know, your ability to query it, I've got concerns about our ability to support that software without a support contract in place. I'm concerned
Or a
about
company that exists.
a company would, maybe this guy goes out of business, then we're totally hosed. I'm concerned about our putting it on one server in the basement with, you know, 2 hard drives on a RAID controller and all these things. If we're facing financial risk for our.
I don't think it's a huge financial risk, but it's possible.
Sure,
But it's
if
an
we're
ethical risk.
facing,
Sorry?
if we're.
It's an
if-
ethical risk. We ethically have to
Right,
provide
right.
that
Right,
information.
if we're facing any kind of risk, I think it's small money to actually solve this problem in the way that would potentially best mitigate that risk for
I'm
us.
thrilled. I'm just, like I said, we've come at it from where we've been used to coming. And
Yeah, we appreciate that, I think, and that, you know, the measured response and stuff, but I think especially on the board, we have some people, not me, of course, that are, you know, have some expertise on this, as you do as well, so, you know, I think it's encouraging to, you know, people are looking down the road, as you were too, but I think you probably just assumed you had to go the less expensive option, but.
And we have a basic figure for what that would cost? The Google conversion, you said?
I got an estimate of 5,900 to convert what we have over, and again, so they could do the catch project, like I just explained to you. That's the only potential downfall, as far as I know. I can go back and explore more.
Right, I mean, I would presume the cost to host it somewhere and then to query it is more than 0, but I can't
You mean
believe
physically hosted?
hosted somewhere else other than here.
So
So,
other than
There
this.
is,
right, like
Cloud.
GCP or Cloud or
AWS.
Amazon, like.
Todd's house.
Right, Todd's house.
Yeah.
You know, the cost to put 1.5 terabytes is more than 0, but it's not big, right? You know, so the net difference between a $6,000 conversion fee and ongoing hosting costs is not gonna be extraordinarily large between that and $2,500, plus the cost we don't see here, which is the electricity to run this server 24 hours a day, right? Which is the support costs when first class goes awry and we're paying someone $120 an hour to query an email for us. There's a lot more cost behind the just purchasing this Dell server than
Right, but, so,
is outlined here.
so, we're having a discussion about options. I think we've already coalesced on the Google conversion option. I don't think anybody's arguing for anything other than that at this point. What I'm trying to move us to is, great, now can we act on that? Can you come back with a proposal, or maybe what we do is we simply replace $2,500 with the $5,900, you said?
$5,900.
$5,900, maybe put in a contingency, we make a resolution now to say that that is our preferred option, not to exceed X amount that we're gonna vote on tonight, and then we can still vote on it.
Yep.
Unless people still want to discuss the options. I'm happy with the Google option. If somebody else, you know, wants to.
I'm good with the Google option.
Same.
If you add $6,000 to the 12,000 and 2,500, you get 2,100, 4,300.
But we don't need the
6
2,500.
minus the 2,500.
So
So the 2,500 comes out of that, Dave.
Yes, so just add 60 or 5,900
what-
to 12.
I mean, you're gonna host it, are you able to work with it on a current PC that you have in the building?
No, no.
No,
It would go
we're
to
saying get away
it would
from
go to
that.
our Gmail hosted. It would just be integrated with the existing.
Give them the software and they convert it over someplace
Give
else.
them, well, give them the data and just, yeah, give them the data, and they just take the data and merge it.
$18,931.
And to answer your question, there's another element that, yes, there is still an entity out there that hosts first-class email systems. But because we use it as for retrieval of historical emails, we don't have to pay the first-class licensing. If we go out and use a cloud service provider to host that data for us, they're gonna start charging us a server license for first class. It's just like Exchange Server.
I'm
So
not,
that's the whole
I'm not
thing, that whole-
proposing we host first class in the cloud in
Right.
any way, shape, or form. I'm proposing we get it out of first class, be done with first class forever, put it into an open standards format, and then we are beholden to no software vendor to be able to,
Right. That
to
may or
help
may not exist.
that may or may not exist anymore, to help get at that data when we need it.
No, I just wanted to present to you that there are other side to it that I haven't mentioned yet, but that's too costly and ongoing. It's not worth even to explore it. But the other option I got was the Google option, which I do like, but we were thinking of containing the cost, and the data was static, so that's why we go in that direction.
If you took the, weird things for advisory committee people to say, if you took the cost out of it, right, what would be your preference, just in terms of like a tech and stability and not having crashing problems? What would be your recommendation if you get away from like the pricing factor?
I would go with migrate everything from first class into Google
It's
email.
Google. Okay, thanks.
And the other catch to this too, in running long term, is we have 195 email in the first class. In Google, then we have at least half of the email from the first class, people are no longer here. When you move it into Gmail, now you have an additional cost because each of those email had translated into a mailbox on Gmail. Now you're adding $10 per mailbox per month.
Why can't you
For
get rid of
these-
those?
I mean, I think.
No, I'm just saying, just
I think
explain
there's
to you.
creative ways to solve that. For example, if we're just looking at this from a historical data perspective, migrate them all to one email box called Norfolk Legacy Email. Right, I mean, we have one new account, it all is sitting under there, it's all queryable. All the original headers will be there as to who sent it, and to whom from whom.
That's a good
I
idea.
think there's creative ways around that. I don't think we have to incur more licensing costs to host legacy emails that aren't active. It's just there
Right,
for
there's no one to
retrieval
respond.
purposes.
So you dump it into a searchable database is what you're doing, right?
Well, there are people who still here, like Bob Bullock, information
Yeah,
still
but
here.
the bill
there
is
are
fine, but everybody else, put them in one.
into one. I can explore that.
Do we pay for people who have left the town government?
There are a handful of people that are still holding it onto. Jack Hathaway's one of them. Fire Chief Bushnell is the other because he has so much data. And the problem is when you export them out, you lose the historical link to the vault. So you got the email, but you don't have the other trails. And there's so many things that could go wrong with it. So this is my decision to keep those two email in place for public record request.
I think typically you keep both accounts. Like, if
Right.
you left and I was still here, I would get proxy access to your account, and I would be assigned to go through your account, keep what's needed, and then your account gets deactivated.
Yep.
Over time.
And do we pay not only by active account, by all accounts? So you can deactivate it so it's not usable, but we pay for the maintenance of a separate account?
No, on the account of the people that is not get requests a lot, I usually, when they terminate or they leave the Norfolk, I export them out into a mailbox format and into an mbox format and keep it for record keeping because we can use different Fedora, other mail client to attach to it and extract out the information we need for record request. So that's how we deal with the people that no longer here that don't have a lot of requests upon.
You take it out of Google and
Yes,
put it
we
somewhere
export
else.
out of Google.
And where does that get put?
It's
Locally?
right that all of that information right now is saved to this to the storage NAS, one here, and it's sort of got replicated over to the DPW. We have two NAS storage.
Maybe it's out of scope of this conversation, but I suggest we look into changing that process too.
One thing I was gonna wait to the end to ask is there a subcommittee of a couple of people who could help give us some feedback? Because we clearly know we need to go in a different direction, but we wanna make sure it's a smart direction. And there might be some real value to one or two or three of you giving us some of your knowledge to for Ton to bounce off it, so we can make,
It can also be done informally, it doesn't have to
Right.
be official, and this is
No, I'm
also
not-
what
it
I meant
doesn't
by
have to
once
be,
you start
just-
pulling one thing, there's a lot of stuff that's
Yeah.
attached.
Whole sweater goes.
If you start lifting the cover, there's always a lot of stuff that behind it, and
I appreciate there's probably 25 years of decision-making as to why
Yeah,
things
that
are
got
the way
us
they
here.
are.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I don't mean to run roughshod over it, but I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to look at this and say, what are the pitfalls of running and hosting our own
Absolutely.
servers and data?
I couldn't
And this
agree
is-
more.
This is it, because all of the best laid plans of having redundancy with RAID across two different sites, all of it failed, all of it. And I'm not saying that it was a bad idea at the time, I'm just saying it didn't do what it was designed to do. At some point, somewhere in the past, someone went to town meeting and said, hey, we need $25,000 for this wonderful, redundant, modern RAID system, 2 locations, backup between them, and when push comes to shove, it was worth 0, right? So I'm not saying we got no value from it, but we certainly didn't get the intended value, and we probably paid a lot more. We paid a premium for something that ultimately didn't deliver. So my
We're at
point
a
is
change point.
now is the time,
It
before we
absolutely
start
is.
throwing
Technology
more
has
money into it, I would say now is the time we learn from this and say this was a failure, right? Let's call it for what it is. We didn't have the collective expertise to manage this type of hardware and software solution in town and in-house, so to speak, and before we just start asking for more money at town meeting to buy the latest and greatest Dell, 6U rack server with PerkEye and RAID 10 and all of those kinds of things, which is gonna cost
No
us
idea what that means.
$30,500 a year, or whatever it may be, I would say we should put the brakes on and maybe have whatever working committee or strategic committee of where should the IT spend really go, and not just be sitting here in another 3 or 5 years saying, well, that one didn't work either.
Exactly. Like I said, I couldn't agree more, and Ton started to give it a lot of thought, but having some people who do this every day be able to bounce off it would be huge.
How about granite tablets? That's pretty fail-safe,
No,
so.
I was thinking chalkboards.
Chalkboards, there you go.
The
So-
Etch-a-sketches were used.
Etch-a-sketch, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
And
I
I
want one
agree
of
with
those
you, I mean, everything that
pencils
you
like they
say,
had in
that
Little House on the
is
Prairie.
completely true, and I completely agree with you. It's all come down to how much can we spend, and how much can we afford as solutions. Every solution has a cost associated with it. When you run a shoestring budget, you, like beer salary and champagne taste. Okay, so somewhere along the way, you have to make compromises. What is the best solution for this? We can present the best solutions, ignore all the costs, and then come back down to earth and say, okay, what can we afford? So it all come back to service level agreement and.
I appreciate all that, but I think in the year 2019, outsourcing it is cheaper than insourcing it.
Okay.
Right? So outsourcing it will get us so many things for free, such as a level of security we could never deliver as a town, a level of data encryption we could never deliver ourselves, a level of redundancy we could never deliver. A lot of that stuff just comes for free by putting it in the cloud. So the cost to host things in the cloud, right? We are taking advantage of the scale of Amazon and Google and things like that. It is pennies on our dollar to host the equivalent amount of data externally than it is to host it internally. When you factor in the hardware, the software support costs, the electricity that we're putting to run these servers, all of those kinds of things. So I would actually counter that with saying not only is the better solution to put it in the cloud, but the less expensive solution right now is to put it in the cloud.
And moving forward.
Right, and moving forward. I think just saying we're on a shoestring budget is the only reason we should be considering
Okay,
not
well,
buying any more hardware for ourselves.
That's great insight.
Back to and some of you guys might have insight into this as you will. So there's a 5,900, but then you also mentioned there could or likely will be some additional costs. So I feel like we're all on board with the 5,900 range, but does it make sense to separate that issue out from this other 12,931 to give you more time to report back in the near future about what some of those additional costs are? So then, like if we approved 5,900 for you for now, right? That's one option, but another option would be to maybe just to defer that for a short period of time. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that. If you think that there's more detailed information that you should have or that we should have before we move forward in that direction, so we actually know what the total cost, even if it's more, I still think, we all think long range, it's gonna make sense, but.
No, that's a wise decision because there's still other variable that don't know, I'm not sure of, is can we dump everything into one mailbox and make it searchable, because now you got 90 emails dumped into one mailbox, and can we search them? And it sounds great until you actually put it in and you start looking for things and, oops, this doesn't come up, oops, that doesn't come up, or wonderful, it's just everything just searchable fine. So it can work just as well, or it might not, and I don't know that answer. So yes, it will be, I need some more time to research on that and talk to the vendor and say, okay, if you dumped it in here, can we search for these things, or can we do a proof of concept of some kind?
Yeah, I'm sure we're not the only people who have a record retention requirement for people who have left. So I think having the time to figure out what other people have done is smart. The question would be, are we compliant for records requests right now?
Yeah, our biggest issue is sometimes we get a request that's very vague, and you can try to ask someone to focus it a little bit, but what will happen, and just happened to say the planning department, they had a request, and there were emails that they had to basically stop what they were doing to be able to review them all and determine which was in litigation and couldn't be released and what could, and back and forth. That's really what takes the time. The time is not tons.
No, I'm sorry. Without this equipment,
$2,500.
Oh,
how are we actually complying with information that's on this equipment?
Right, so if we
you
do not
can
approve the
now.
20
You just, it's
I,
just,
I can now because I
Just
can
clunky.
attach that to,
So you take the hard drives, you put them into somewhere else, and you
Yeah,
run the
it's
query
clunky,
on
but
that.
you can do
Okay.
it.
Okay.
All right.
it's
all right.
doable right
It's not
now.
like an emergency.
are
If
we
had to wait a
necessarily
week
gonna
or
get a
two.
request on these tomorrow? Who knows?
But once this goes on the town TV and people,
Good point.
It's like Green Cards. That's like a down.
So we could just approve the services fees, the roughly
What's the question? I'm sorry.
$1,300 tonight.
13,000.
Sorry, 13,000, thank you, yes.
Dave was talking out of turn.
Yeah, he does.
Yes. And then we'll
Okay.
come back to you. It just means an extra meeting for you. That's the only,
Where are we at? Could this fit into the town meeting cycle?
could it wait till November, do you think?
We're already in what, basically September?
At this point, yes, it can be.
Good.
because
Then
I
we can do that.
Because the emergency is really the unpaid
bills.
bills. I don't think it's as much, I mean, it deserves thought, but I don't think it's an emergency.
Mr. Lutz, I'm sorry, are there?
No,
we
go
done?
ahead.
Okay.
Can I ask a general question?
No. Next?
What is,
Harsh but fair, our chairman.
what is our cash reserve that we're drawing? What's the amount? Why is?
50.
First time I've heard this.
Any other, anything to add on the longer term for the year with cost and some of these? I know you don't have real numbers in front of you either, so it's not really a fair question. No, it's nothing.
what other servers do we have?
Oh, no.
I mean, that would just be something
no.
to ask as part of this
That's
general
scary.
replanning, like, not tonight, we don't need that information.
Cool,
but-
I agree long-term, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hear
So,
about that
so
later.
Ton has started to map out
Yeah.
what we have and what we
Oh,
could
really?
go to.
Oh, would you be able to share that with us when that's done, so?
I told
some
him
of
you
our
guys were gonna ask, didn't
Experts
I?
could see that?
Yes, she
We're
did.
horrible.
Yeah, yes, we do. I have the, what we currently have now, and what my vision, what it should be down the line. And I'm making a lot of
Assumptions.
assumptions that this is what we do now, but along the way, there are a lot of programs that are going to migrate to the cloud because the vendor's already there. So it's just a question of when.
Right.
So between now till then, we have to do something.
Right, and I only ask because I don't want a decision that's made on this long-term thing being incompatible with the next decision we have to make
Right.
as the next system.
Right.
Has the same thing come up.
Yeah, when you go to the cloud, there are cases that make sense, there are cases that won't make sense once you go under the cover.
Yeah,
There are programs like the CDS program that just died, and that is a special DB4 database. And I talked to the vendor, and they're not sure that's going to be even behave correctly or behave well
right,
in the cloud.
yeah.
And we don't know that until we test it out there, just bring it in there and just test to see if it works or not. And because they haven't done it before, doesn't mean it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that he doesn't know if it's going to work or not. So unlike
So it
some of
might
those
be
programs like
somewhat a
that.
case-by-case basis.
But there should be a plan.
You looking for a motion?
There should be, and there hasn't been.
Yeah.
So I move that we authorize spending not to exceed $13,000 out of the advisory board contingency fund in order to fund the emergency data recovery costs listed here on our exhibit.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, that passes unanimously to spend the $12,931.49,
You didn't ask for further debate.
and. So.
Send it via email.
And then,
Did I get a second?
yeah,
I
yeah.
seconded you,
Oh, yeah.
Arthur.
Well, basically, thank you.
And
I was
then
busy
we will
wondering
look
if it-
forward to hearing more from you through
Yes,
Blind
thank you.
Tide
So
Close, right?
I've started a list of warrant articles for the fall. We're gonna open the warrant at the next selectmen's meeting on the 3rd. This will be one of the things that I will just keep adding to the list, so we don't forget it. I know we're gonna meet in October at least, so, we can talk about it then and tee it up for a town meeting action.
Yeah, yeah, and depending on how the warrant looks, if we think we need more time, I think that this is an area where I think on the board, there's some interest and some knowledge. So if we had to maybe even schedule like an earlier meeting than we might typically, so we don't feel rushed or compressed, because I think there's a fair amount to talk about here.
I think,
then
excuse me,
That's okay, then, I don't think that would be a problem.
I think it would be very helpful a few weeks before.
Yeah,
We're going to talk about it at an advisory meeting, that any material that Ton has, if he wants me to try to get the group together collectively, but at least send it all,
Yep.
a few weeks before, so you can digest it, ask him your questions, and it may help
How do we,
facilitate.
what's the right word, square this with all the open meeting requirements and everything?
So he can send the material to me, I can send it to you as a group, you have to respond individually.
Is there a committee other than because, I mean, ideally, what happens is there's some
tech committee.
committee, they help figure out what IT
Oversight
should
kinda
be, and then they give us an article, as opposed to us doing
I-
it. We're usually not the people developing it.
Yeah, there is not one now.
So I think what I'm looking for is a couple of you, no more than, say, 3, I'm not sure who the right ones are, is to simply be able to provide some, you could meet, less than a quorum of you could meet with Ton and talk about what he's come up with and bounce around some ideas and start to work towards a plan.
Us as just, concerned citizens,
Yes.
not the advisory board.
Yes.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
be clear about this.
What-
Yes.
is
Really,
there-
really smart, concerned
What
citizens.
hoops have to be jumped through to create the town technology steering committee and do it kind of like the
Yeah, if you
above
want to have an
board, the
official
right
one,
way?
we could do
Because
that too.
the real answer is, and I'm speaking for myself, right, but the general vibe I get in this town and our taxes and things is that we're always short-sighted. We always have to stick a Band-Aid on something, and then a year and a half later, we're back asking for more money for a bigger and better Band-Aid, and we repeat that cycle over and over
Yep.
and over again, right? And this
All towns
is,
do
to me, is just like klaxons blaring of this is the same problem over again,
Sure.
right? So rather than just throwing another big Band-Aid at it, we need like just the same as there's the downtown planning strategy and the school building
Energy.
energy planning strategy. We ought to have a technology strategy of where do we expect the town to be in 5 years, and then we can start making incremental we decide
Plan them.
what the objective is. Is it run in the cloud? Is it some hybrid model? Is it whatever it may be? We can agree, and if it needs a town vote, it needs a town vote, but we can agree on what that desired outcome is, and then we can start making, I think, some more sound financial planning decisions and requests at town meeting and investments in moving towards that goal. Because right now, as far as I could see, there is no goal, and it's just hair on fire or something broke. We need,
Well, that's what my impression is it's been. I may not be fair in that assessment from what I've seen in a few months, but I think you're correct. Whether there was a committee back in the day when technology first became a thing, I don't know. And perhaps if it was, when we finally got to the point of having a director, maybe that was determined it wasn't needed. I'm guessing here.
Yeah, I mean, and also just to, I think prior, decision makers have been under a lot of fiscal constraints. We're trying not to bring up taxes, the school budgets, we're always trying to make a ton of trade-offs. So on the one hand, I sort of get the concern that, maybe, let's spend strategically, I'm totally with that. But by the same token, we put people in a horrible position of having massive cost pressures if things just can't go up. Jack will go away, come up with a level budget. Is it a shock that maybe happened at the expense of some of this stuff? Probably not. Also, I think a lot of governments, they flock together. A lot of these local agencies, I mean, how many local governments even do anything on the cloud? That might not be the right thing, but there's, people do talk about what other towns do. That's a big pressure too. So what's the process for establishing a committee? Can we get a warrant article? Did the
I think you
selectmen
could
just
ask,
do it?
you could have
Selectmen
selectmen
could
ask them to
appoint it.
Okay.
form a committee.
So let's just,
I think
so
your
yeah,
only,
let's do that.
the only challenge I worry about, and hopefully it wouldn't be in this case, is that we just have trouble sometimes finding people who want to serve.
I'll
Hopefully
volunteer.
technology is something cool that everyone wants to be on.
I'll
But
volunteer.
Sound like you do.
I also wonder if our good buddy David Rosenberg would be interested. He has a strong technical background. He's a great civic
he does.
Oh, does he? Is he a techie person too?
Who?
developer. Mr. Rosenberg.
I bet people would volunteer to be on that. We already
We can ask for more volunteers, I'm just sure I'll.
You know,
I'll put
so
money
I
where
would
my
have
mouth
them
is.
put together a charge and determine how big a committee should be.
Oh,
Is it 3
If you're on
members?
the advisory board, you're not allowed to be on any other committees.
That's
Right,
right.
That's the
that's
problem.
right.
Wait,
why-
but
that's why the-
there's an exception for the capital committee.
But this is,
Is this really a capital spending committee, just that relates to
really.
technology?
Is it-
I'm just saying.
You could be
Somebody should
a,
read the fine print.
Yeah.
I would love to serve
ahead.
if that was allowed,
Okay.
for other
Okay.
people to figure out, the lawyers.
no, this is all great. I really appreciate it. I think this is, you know, this is bad that this happened this summer, but I think it's gonna lead us down a better path, so I'm not unhappy about that.
All right.
Hey, worst
It's
case scenario, if we're gonna spend $2,500, I'll charge you $2,000, I'll keep it in my basement. Promise you it won't crash. Save money, win-win.
Todd's happy to get it out of his business.
Yeah.
So,
He's a stand-up guy.
all right, so, unless there are anyone that is against it, I think we shall adjourn the meeting, and I think we're done.
I move
Is
to
there anything
adjourn.
else?
Seconded,
Thank you, Arthur.
All
Thank
right,
you all.
anytime.
we're done. Thank you.